It's been almost a month since Guild Wars 2 launched its latest expansion, End of Dragons, and I'm here to break down its new features and share my opinion on if it's worth the price tag for new or returning players. I'm Adrian, welcome to the video, let's get into it. Let's start things off with the Jade Bot, one of the main features in the expansion. Getting the Jade Bot for free requires players to reach a certain point in the story, and they'll be given a tier 1 Jade Bot core on that character. When equipped, players will get a vitality boost for some survivability, and the corresponding mastery line allows you to unlock more cool features like setting up a personal waypoint anywhere in the world with a set cooldown, and replacing your down state heal skill with an auto revive from your bot, which also goes on cooldown. And these will work anywhere in the Guild Wars 2 PvE world, not just on End of Dragons maps. But they won't work in PvP, World vs. World, raids, or fractals. The Jade Bot also comes with 2 module slots that can be filled from a workbench with nifty tech gizmos like a Mount Energy booster alongside a Siege Turtle damage enhancer, for example. And there are plenty of module choices to choose from in an upgrade, so you'll have plenty of useful customization options. Jade Bot cores can be crafted once you purchase the recipes using the new research note currency, and they can be upgraded all the way to tier 10. Now, I like the usefulness of the bot overall, but I'm disappointed that these are per character and not account wide. You can craft them and send them to your alts, of course, or play the EOD story on each character to get the bot for free. If you have more than 20 alts though, good luck. The Jade Bot ultimately is handy in most situations, like putting waypoints in hard to get areas or in meta boss fight locations so you can get instantly back up and rejoin the fight. So this is a good addition to the game. Let's get to fishing and skiffing next, 2 new features I was very excited about. With End of Dragons launch, players can find various fishing nodes in bodies of water throughout Tyria, and once you've gotten your rod, you're free to fish. There are over 200 new types of fish in the game for every region in Tyria, tied to fishing collection achievements, and every caught fish can be consumed for new cooking material in fish fillet, and the rarity of these fishes offer better tiers of fish fillet and even legendary crafting materials. Fishing power is a new stat your character has that can be seen in the new fishing panel within the hero panel itself, and this is where you'll need to equip lures and bait, which increases your fishing power. New consumable food can also be used to increase fishing power, and this stat increases your chance to catch fish of higher rarity and the size of the marker mechanic when one bites. Speaking of mechanics, simply hit the fishing icon or hotkey J to pull out your rod, aim the cursor at a node, and hit skill number 1 to fish. An exclamation mark on your character notifies you when one bites, so press 1 again to begin the minigame. Here you'll need to move your marker left or right to keep the fish within it while filling up the bar, and once full, you've caught it, rinse and repeat. Your new skiff or boat works great for fishing because you'll find plenty of offshore or coastal nodes that requires you to be on your boat, which by the way also gives you or your party a fishing buff to the fishing power stat based on how many fish you and your party have caught. Now, from a mechanics standpoint, it's a decent fishing system when compared to other MMORPGs out there, but not the best nor the most convenient, and I find that needing the extra bag space to hold all the bait and lures, which are per character by the way, not per account, it's a bit of a hassle. You can use your shared inventory or storage, but that's not the point. I still like this addition to Guild Wars 2, and there have been plenty of days since launch where I did nothing but fish parties, and it's a fun way to wind down with friends in between the content. Can you make money off it? Sure. Fillets are in demand, as are the chunks of ancient ambergris which are needed for the new legendaries. Okay, now on to what many perceive as one of the main selling points of this expansion, the Siege Turtle mount. Previously, during the first 2 weeks after launch, the only way to get it is by beating the meta event on the Dragon's End map, which drops the turtle egg that starts the mount collection. But that has changed, as players can now get their turtle egg for map currency via a vendor instead, if you'd rather not endure the Jade Sea meta event. More on that later. Once acquired, a short collection is required in order to raise your turtle up from a hatchling to mature, and among the things you'll need to do is complete more meta events, some node gathering on the new maps, and complete one strike mission. To date, I've never seen a community so split about one mount than this one. You either hate the process of getting it or you don't. As for the mount itself, the turtle is very much a cooperative mount, so you won't be fully utilizing its benefits in the open world content like meta events if there isn't a passenger with you to take advantage of the ammo stack and gunner skills. The good news is you can let anyone ride it by making the backseat public, or keep it private if you have a party or squad mate instead. So is the turtle worth the hassle? As the driver, you get one skill called Slam that does 200 break bar or CC damage, and the chances of you dismounting is very low because the mount has such high HP. The damage from Slam can be upgraded via the Mastery Line or Jade Bot modules, but it's the passenger side that gets all the fun. The turtle C skill fires the Jade cannons to an AoE area, and it has 5 charges that replenishes, in addition to 2 other skills. Look, it's a slow mount on your own, but pretty fun with your passenger to take to world bosses or meta events, and I'm starting to see a lot more siege turtles in the usual events like Dragonstorm or 𝑮𝒂𝒍𝒍, you name it. I've stopped using mine because the novelty wears off pretty fast when you realize that it's faster to break CC using the Waystation EMP, and that there isn't any specific content besides the Jade C meta where you feel like the turtle would play a more pivotal role. Last point on usefulness though, the final mastery unlock, which gives the increased HP to all your other mounts, now that's very useful. Therefore, while nice to have, I do question its existence. Previous mounts from the Path of Fire expansion had very distinct features that allowed players to solve environmental obstacles. Beetles and raptors were great for closing distances fast. Springers and sky scales helped with the verticality, and the skimmer was an excellent mount to traverse water and underwater fast. So ultimately, what does the Siege Turtle mount add to the game besides being a 2-seater mount that breaks CC, clears debris in a meta, and cleaves trash mobs? That's a question for ArenaNet to answer in the near future, assuming new content will require it, or if it makes its way to World vs. World. For new players, don't concern yourselves with the turtle for now. Work on Path of Fire mounts and the Sky Scale first if you haven't already. Now, probably my favorite part when it comes to new Guild Wars 2 expansions is the arrival of the new Elite Specializations, because they offer up new ways to play your class. As you'd expect, all current Guild Wars 2 classes get a new Elite spec in EOD, and while I'm still making my way exploring most of them, I'm thoroughly enjoying the Will Bender for my Guardian, as I found a sweet Condi Bender build that just melts things in the open world, but the mechanics for the Engineer is where it's at. I am so hooked on the way it plays because of the Jade Robot Pad, and I'm looking forward to tinkering with it for other modes I play, like World vs. World. I've been playing these two primarily throughout this expansion launch and having a ton of fun with it. It's still early days, so the meta is still shaping with these new specs, but loads of folks aren't really happy about changes to other existing specs and skills, and I can empathize with that. Now, if you want to know how capable these new specs are for raids or other content, I'm not your guy for that. There are plenty of other Guild Wars 2 content creators out there who covers build guides and more, or even websites like Snow Crows or Meta Battle, so check them out. If you're new to Guild Wars 2, while the new specs are nice, I still think you're better off learning the Heart of Thorns or Path of Fire Elite Specializations first, because they make up a large part of today's endgame meta for all kinds of group content that you might be interested in. And these will even help you down the line in understanding how your class plays and what it can do with the new specs from EOD. Okay, let's move on to some brief thoughts about the End of Dragons maps next. And we have 4 new play areas: Saitung Province, New Kaineng, the Echo Vault Wild, and of course Dragon's End. To me at least, I really enjoyed my time in each. Maybe less in New Kaineng because parts of the design just felt repetitive, and it's a nightmare to traverse if you don't have a sky skill. So RIP to those who don't. But once you learn that there are teleporters on the map, in addition to making use of zip lines, it will get easier, I promise. Now, daily repeatable tasks are back on 3 of the maps, minus Dragon's End, and they do take longer to complete compared to the Path of Fire ones, for example. But otherwise, plenty of content and achievements on all of them to keep you busy. All 4 of them, of course, have their own meta events, culminating in a final boss fight. The fights and mechanics of all 4 are very fun to do, but I've had my experience tainted the first few days due to plenty of bugs that prevented meta events from completing, namely the Aetherblade Assault in Saitung, and of course the Jade C meta, both of which have been fixed and seen loads of changes to benefit the player. Plenty have already been said about the Su 1 meta in Dragon's End, and yes, it is very challenging and time consuming, especially for new players or returning players jumping straight into End of Dragons. Look, my thoughts on the Dragon's End meta is pretty simple. I like that it's challenging. Heck, I did it 11 tries the first week, enduring shitty bugs and RNG tail phases that took away so much time from the timer, and I got my turtle egg on the 11th try. And I said to myself, I probably won't do this again, not because it's hard, but because it rewards your efforts so poorly. And frankly, it felt insulting to see what you got per completion versus the amount of time you spent doing the pre-meta events, building up damage stacks and more. It just did not feel worth it. But let's get back to the difficulty, because ArenaNet's decision to gate the turtle mount behind this meta when EOD first launched was baffling, considering the difficulty spike from Saitung Province to the Jade Sea. You cannot expect new players jumping into the first zone to master raid builds, raid specs, raid rotations, and become masters of endgame content by the time they hit the last zone for this meta. And while they've been adamant about their decision, I still think it was a bad call. It's a fun fight, all things considered. It's just the circumstances surrounding its release that sucked, and it brought out the most toxic I've seen in Guild Wars 2's community, which is sad. And finally, for maps, there's another new area. We also have the Arborstone. This is a new player hub that can be upgraded in its mastery line to bring it on par with Sun's Refuge or the Eye in the North, packed with crafting stations, banks, trading posts, ally crafting, strike vendors, and more. There's also a nice entertainment place that I won't spoil for you, just make sure to explore everywhere. Now, zooming in on the content, this expansion also comes with 4 new strikes, aka 10-player instance boss fights, and they are the Aetherblade Hideout, the Junkyard, the Kainang Overlook, and the Harvest Temple. All strikes are tied to the main story, representing the 4 new maps, so I won't be spoiling any of that. If you're a new or returning player worried about jumping into group content like these strikes, don't worry, they are definitely doable, and from pre-EOD previews, we know ArenaNet has slowly been poking and prodding the community to try harder group content like strikes, and with End of Dragons, I think it's a good place to start. The first 2, the Aetherblade Hideout and the Junkyard, are the easiest of the 4 mechanically, while the other 2 are a slight jump up in difficulty, requiring more coordination and proper boon distributions within the group. They all offer decent rewards like the new green crystals that can be traded at Arborstone in return for legendary crafting mats and more. In fact, the Turtle Collection requires players to successfully beat the 3rd strike, and while some aren't happy about being shoehorned into group content like this, I personally don't mind it, because the strikes are fun and offers me a replacement for the non-existent dungeon running experience in the current endgame. Even better, completing all 4 weekly offers gold and a legendary insight as well, which is required for your legendary armor crafting. And of course, I can't end this video without touching on the main story of this expansion, at least briefly. Without any major spoilers, I'll say this was a really good conclusion to the Elder Dragon storyline, which took years and years of build-up, and I thought it was well done. From our arrival to Cantha and the story progression taking us from map to map, to the eventual finale and post-credit scene, it all felt well-paced. There's plenty of new characters in End of Dragons, some returning from the first game even, but 2 that stood out the most for me was Anka and Detective Rama, whose voice talents were phenomenal, because they sounded real and gritty and not over the top. In some parts of the story, yeah, there's some sloppy and rushed writing, and some shortcuts were definitely taken to quickly explain what's happened to Cantha over the last century, but I can overlook those stuff because the rest of the content that envelops the main story more than makes up for it. There's plenty of lore in addition to map stories from tasks, events, and collectibles that kinda explains things that are missing. Now, while I was slightly let down by how little cinematic cutscenes there were, the overall set piece for major story revelations or boss fights still got me engaged narratively, and the music production in this expansion is top-notch. There's times, especially during the final fight for the Jade Sea meta or the story instance, where I felt like I was playing Final Fantasy XIV. Look, at the end of the day, Guild Wars 2 story may not be your thing, but if it is, I highly encourage you to play the End of Dragon story and experience it for yourself. In conclusion, for what this expansion has brought to the game, feature and content-wise at $30 for the base edition, is very much worth it in my opinion, especially for the standout features like the new elite specs, all the new content, strikes, the stories, and fishing, just to name a few, while others I'm sure will show its value over time, through the new Living World season maybe, which I hope will be coming soon. While End of Dragons was very enjoyable for me, I do feel like from a player agency perspective, parts of the new features are a tiny step backward. Guild Wars 2 prides itself on minimizing grind and solving player problems, but with the Jade Bot and fishing being so alt-unfriendly, for example, it kind of feels off-brand for ArenaNet, while in other areas it kind of looks like they are not really in touch with what their player base truly wants or enjoys. Case in point, them assuming everyone would love the raid boss style open world meta in Dragon's End just to get their turtles. While they haven't burned any of my bridges, ArenaNet has some work to do in order to avoid this happening again. Whether that's more open betas and not just big streamer or fan favorite tours, who knows. Now, if you're a new player thinking about playing the game for the first time watching this, or wondering if End of Dragons should be your very first expansion purchase here, the answer is no. I'd still recommend Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire before End of Dragons, due to the sheer amount of things you'll need to unlock first, like gliding and the base mounts, not to mention learning all the new mechanics via the story and map metas gradually before jumping into current day content, because in EOD I promise you'll come across things that you'll be glad you got to experience in earlier expansions before doing them here. And that's it from me, folks. I'd love to hear from fellow Guild Wars 2 players. Did you like the expansion? Did you not? And what are your favorite new features? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Meantime, hit that like button if you're new here, and feel free to subscribe to the channel for more on Guild Wars 2 and MMOs, and don't forget to click that bell icon which notifies you whenever a new video is up. Once again, I'm Adrian, and I thank you for watching.